The night of January 27, 1986, was unusually cold for Cape Canaveral, Florida. A deep chill settled over the landscape, clinging to the metal structures of Launch Complex 39B. On the launch pad, the Space Shuttle Challenger stood silhouetted against a dark sky, its white exterior gleaming under powerful floodlights. Inside the various control rooms at Kennedy Space Center, the atmosphere was a familiar mix of focused calm and low-level energy that always preceded a launch. Technicians moved through their checklists, their voices low and measured, as they confirmed the status of thousands of systems. The mission, STS-51L, was scheduled for the following morning, and everything appeared to be proceeding as planned. Elsewhere, however, the quiet was filled with a growing sense of unease. Far from the launch site in Utah, a group of engineers at Morton Thiokol, the contractor responsible for the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, were becoming increasingly worried. They watched the weather reports from Florida with mounting anxiety. The temperature was predicted to drop into the 20s Fahrenheit overnight, far colder than any previous launch condition. For them, the cold was not just an atmospheric condition. It was a direct threat to the integrity of a critical component they had built and knew had a specific vulnerability. The concern was so significant that it prompted a late-night teleconference. This was not a routine call. It was an urgent discussion connecting the engineers in Utah with their own management and with key managers at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and Kennedy Space Center. The source of the engineers' deep-seated worry was a deceptively simple component: the O-ring. These were large, circular seals made of a specific type of rubber. Designed to sit in the joints between the segments, each booster was assembled from several large cylindrical sections filled with propellant. The O-ring's job: form a perfect seal at the joints, stop extremely hot, high-pressure gas from escaping. If gas leaked past the seal, it could burn through the booster and compromise the external fuel tank. The rubber was sensitive to temperature. In the cold, it lost pliability. A working O-ring needed to be resilient. At ignition, internal pressure would make the metal casing bulge, creating a tiny gap in the joint. A proper O-ring would expand instantly into that gap, keeping the seal. In cold weather, the rubber was sluggish. For a critical fraction of a second, a path for hot gas could exist. This wasn't new to Morton Thiokol engineers. Previous flights showed O-ring erosion and blow-by. Post-flight inspections found breaches of the primary O-ring, leaving small soot marks and even charring the rubber. Among the engineers at Morton Thiokol, two voices in particular became prominent: Roger Boisjoli and Alan McDonald. Boisjoli had specialized in the booster seals for years and had become increasingly alarmed by the O-ring problem. He had written a memo months earlier, warning of a potential catastrophe if the issue was not addressed, that a failure of the joint seal could lead to the loss of a mission. His warnings were known within the company. On the night before the launch, Boisjoli presented charts showing the O-rings failed to perform at lower temperatures and argued that NASA should not fly outside their experience base. The data was inconclusive at the predicted temperatures because they had never flown so cold. His recommendation was unequivocal: delay until at least 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Alan McDonald at Kennedy shared these concerns. The Space Shuttle program was under pressure to maintain an ambitious schedule. The presence of a civilian teacher had captured the nation's imagination. Media coverage was extensive. Another delay would be highly visible and costly. Within NASA, a can-do attitude made it difficult to accept a no-go, especially without 100% certainty. Managers questioned the engineers' data to prove failure, rather than to prove safety. The desire to protect the schedule was a powerful, unspoken force. The teleconference began around 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time. It lasted for nearly 3 hours, linking Morton Thiokol in Utah, Marshall in Alabama, and Kennedy in Florida. Roger Boisjoli and Arnie Thompson methodically presented 13 charts: the history of O-ring erosion, the physics of the joint at ignition, and the troubling effect of cold on resiliency. Their conclusion was firm. They could not recommend launching below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. NASA officials reacted with skepticism and impatience. Larry Malloy challenged their logic, pointing to damage at warmer temperatures and arguing the data was not perfectly linear. questioning the 53-degree cutoff. The tone shifted from technical review to debate. The burden of proof was placed on the engineers. Prove it was not safe to fly. Frustrated, Morton Thiokol managers requested an offline caucus. 4 senior managers, including Senior Vice President Gerald Mason, sat to decide. Mason reportedly told Robert Lund to take off his engineering hat and put on his management hat. A shift from technical safety to business judgment, weighing stark warnings against the consequences of delay. After tense debate, Thiokol management decided to overrule their engineers and prepared to change their official recommendation. When they rejoined, they stated the data was inconclusive and recommended proceeding. Back in Florida, Alan McDonald was stunned. On the morning of January 28, 1986, the temperature at the launch pad was approximately 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice formed on the launch tower. Despite the cold, the countdown proceeded. At 11:38 a.m., the main engines ignited. Seconds later, the solid rocket boosters ignited. With a deafening roar, Challenger rose into the clear blue Florida sky. Millions watching on television, and thousands on the ground, saw a perfect launch. Almost immediately, a camera captured a small, dark puff of smoke near the right-hand booster's aft field joint. The very joint the engineers had worried about. The stiff rubber failed to fully seal, allowing hot, pressurized gas to escape. For a brief moment, the smoke disappeared, but the damage had been done. As stresses increased, the temporary seal gave way. Just under 1 minute, a flickering flame appeared and grew like a blowtorch aimed at the external tank. Filled with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, the tank's structure was compromised. About 73 seconds after liftoff, the tank disintegrated. The boosters flew erratically. The orbiter tore apart in the sky. On the ground, cheers turned to gasps of confusion and horror. Then, a long, terrible silence fell over the communication channels. The televised images of the branching smoke trails became an indelible, tragic icon. A moment of national hope turning instantly into one of profound shock and loss. In the wake of the disaster, President Reagan appointed the Rogers Commission. Chaired by William P. Rogers, it included scientists, former astronauts like Neil Armstrong, and Air Force generals. Its mandate: find the probable cause and prevent a repeat. The investigation was methodical, public, and transparent, an effort to restore faith in a system that had failed. A key moment came when Richard Feynman dunked O-ring material in ice water and showed how the cold rubber lost its resiliency. The commission obtained the night's logs and interviewed Morton Thiokol engineers, including Roger Boisjoli, who described their warnings and how they were overruled. The June 1986 report indicted not just the O-ring but the decision-making process, schedule pressures, broken communication channels, and a culture that normalized deviance. The Space Shuttle program was grounded for nearly 3 years. Extensive redesigns were made to the solid rocket boosters, a new joint design, additional O-ring, and built-in heater. NASA overhauled management and safety protocols, creating a new office for safety and mission assurance, and empowering engineers to voice dissent. The Challenger decision became required study in engineering and management, a tragic example of groupthink, schedule pressure, and flawed organizational culture leading to catastrophic failure. The phrase about taking off an engineering hat became a warning. The legacy is learning, not blame. Pay attention to small details, respect technical expertise, and have the courage to say no when a risk is too great. The decision was small in the moment, a single go. Its consequences were immeasurable. The memory of that cold January morning is a somber inheritance, a lesson written in smoke against the sky.